At the intersection of true crime and real estate, you'll find Crime Estate. I'm Heather.
And my name is Elena. As real estate agents and true crime junkies, we view crimes through a different lens.
So walk through the door of some of the most notorious true crimes with us and discover how sometimes the scene of the crime has its own story to tell. Hey ladies, we are back with another Crime Estate podcast.
Hey y'all, so good to see you, Heather, and so good to see our producer, Melanie. Welcome to 2024. It's been an interesting year in the world of real estate. Not only have real estate rates come down a little. Mel, do you have like an angel sound you can play on that soundboard?
Yeah, like hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Heather, you sent us a cool story.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in our world, interest rates are a huge factor, but in the rest of the world's interesting real estate news, you know, if y'all have listened to this podcast from the beginning, you know that we've all been a little bit obsessed with the Murdaugh murders, Melanie maybe in particular, and also the trial of Alec Murdaugh. And just this week, the house at Modell has been listed for auction with a starting reserve price of $1.1 million. So, you know, a little interesting real estate sale to start the year.
So the property was purchased in 2023. I mean, this house and this bigger land has changed hands a few times, but the family doesn't actually want the house. The ones that purchased it earlier this year, they really just wanted the larger property for the hunting and timberland. So they're selling off about the 21 acres that includes the actual property, the home itself, the 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath house. They are not selling off the dog kennels. If you know the Murdaugh story, they're pretty notorious.
Well, and 21 acres sounds huge, but I think originally the whole property is what, like 1,700 acres that they bought?
Yeah, this is sort of kind of like ranch land, or to me, the analogy is in like the Texas Hill Country, where people get these kind of family ranches where they play, and they may actually do some agriculture, or there's some cattle, but they're also kind of for fun. This is sort of what I imagine it is, but with hunting and timber in the Low Country. But so that auction is going to start around February 15th, I think.
Well, I think it's started already. So an auction lasts, like a couple of weeks or a set amount of time. So the auction has started. It has a starting reserve price of $1.1 million. And then the auction will close on February 15th. So if you're interested in the Modell property, you still have a couple of weeks.
Well, and I don't want to digress today because we have a really good and important story to tell. But there's been a lot going on in the whole Murdaugh world right now. If Becky Hill, who was the worked in the court, and she wrote the book. Well, now she's being investigated for potential jury tampering, and the book came out that she plagiarized a reporter, and so they had to take back the book. So there's a lot going on in the Murdaugh world if you haven't caught up.
So not in South Carolina, but today we're going to be in Connecticut. When I think of Connecticut, I think of an 80s TV show. Can you guess which one? Very Connecticut-y.
Connecticut? What is the word for that? I don't know. No, because I mean 80s TV in Connecticut. Okay. But you sent this out in the text chain on our little group earlier, and so I actually Googled iconic 80s Connecticut TV. And so I have a guess, but it's only because I Googled it.
Okay, what
guess? About you, Mel? Do you have?
No idea.
My guess is Who's the Boss?
Yes, yay! All right, good job. I loved that show.
And now that I think about it, Tony Danza does not strike me as super Connecticut, but Judith, what's her name?
Judith Light, Angela.
Yeah. She's very proper Connecticut.
That's exactly what I think of when I think of Connecticut.
And I think that part of Connecticut was really close to New York, because a lot of people who work in the city live in Connecticut.
Well, that's where Tony was from.
Yes.
New York,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, yes. Well, I should go watch my reruns.
Yeah. Okay, so I appreciate the brevity there, but This is really intense. So we're going to get back to crime because it's what we talk about. We are also doing something new, as this is the first time that the scene of the crime was an apartment rental unit. And as much fun it is to discuss gorgeous old mansions, the reality is that's not where most people live. Crimes can occur anywhere and to anyone, and we want to make sure that we are covering the broad diversity of victims and where people live. Also, the story is infuriating. I was so mad and triggered while researching and writing, but it's a story that needs to be told.
Okay, so listeners, you don't know Alana like I do, but if Alana is infuriated, it's serious, and her fury is like almost intoxicating. It radiates out of her, and I can feel it right now. And so I'm going to have a little glass of wine,
do it.
A sip of my glass of wine, and go ahead.
Okay.
Like, let's
All right.
tell us the story.
Okay. So on December 12th, 2021, Lauren Smith Fields was pronounced dead at the age of 23 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Bridgeport is a port city 60 miles from Manhattan and 40 miles from the Bronx and is the most populous city in the state of Connecticut. Lauren lived at 33 Plymouth Street at an 1,100 square foot multifamily home built in 1917. Her apartment, the first floor, had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. So when I call it an apartment, it's not what I think of. Like it wasn't like a big multi-level apartment. It was a cute little house.
Yeah, so she was renting from like probably this house was like a house at one point that somebody broke up and made into rental units, not a high-rise apartment complex.
Right, and the whole street looked like that. They all look like little cookie cutter houses, super cute. So Lauren's death sparked a new conversation about what is known as missing white woman syndrome, a phrase introduced into the lexicon by PBS anchor Gwen Ifill 2 decades ago. According to NPR, the term missing white woman syndrome is, quote, used to describe the media's fascination with and detailed coverage of the cases of missing or endangered white women compared to the seeming disinterest in covering the disappearances of people of color.
Well, and we've talked about this several times, and that's one of our goals for this year is to cover more diverse victims, more diverse crimes. But it's been really something that's very much in the news recently, not just, missing white woman syndrome, but we've talked about it with Native Americans and, a lot of different minorities that they don't get the coverage in the news that a missing white woman might. And we're not saying like, white women shouldn't get the coverage, but everybody should have equal coverage.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it also isn't just about women and girls. Research has shown that there is a lack of media coverage when boys are missing, abducted, and murdered as well. And also, just to kind of highlight that fact, have you ever heard of the case of Latoya Figueroa?
I have not heard of Latoya Figueroa. Mel, have you?
No.
She disappeared from Philadelphia the same year that Natalie Holloway disappeared from Aruba. And I know we all heard of Natalie Holloway and continue to hear about Natalie, but never heard of Latoya's still unsolved disappearance. So just kind of highlight kind of what we're talking about there.
I know that when we had started off this podcast, we talked about JonBenét and we talked about how the media, including us, were so enthralled with the story. And, let's be honest now, part of it was of her picturesque, beautiful, white blonde. I mean, these are things that we should not be obsessed with by any means, but, rich family. And we realized then that as much of the story being fascinating, that the media attention at the time was captured in part because of what she looked like.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, and to bring this full circle in Small World, you all know that Natalie Holloway's mom and JonBenét's dad ended up dating, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that is weird.
It's really
Okay,
weird.
side note.
But
yeah.
I mean, it's a small world. Yeah.
So back to Lauren. Lauren was a student at Norwalk Community College and had her own business with dreams of becoming a physical therapist. And if you look at pictures of Lauren, she was a beautiful Black woman with a love of travel. And I mean, she was absolutely stunning, like beautiful.
Really, really pretty.
So on the evening of December 13th, 2021, Chantel Fields text messaged her daughter, Lauren. It was unlike Lauren to not contact her mom during the day, especially after a date with a guy that she met on the dating app Bumble. Now, 2 of the 3 of us were all married well before online dating apps, but today they are commonplace and very standard way to meet singles. Bumble is unique in that for heterosexual matches, the woman makes the first move by contacting matched males.
That's so interesting. I mean, you're right. I did not grow up in a world of online dating, and it sounds terrifying. But there's something to me that makes online dating almost feel like a real estate or a realtor relationship too. Like you are meeting somebody you don't know, maybe in a strange place. And so I think, I don't know, I'll be curious. We can talk about this later, but I think there's a lot of like the same checks and balances. Like, hey, I'm meeting this guy and his name is XXX and here's a picture of his profile and his phone number is whatever. And we're going to meet here. I mean, I do that when I'm meeting a client that I know. I'll send to my husband or my team. I'll be like, hey, y'all check in with me in 20 minutes. Here's my code word, much like you would do for dating.
Yeah, for sure.
Bumble is kind of one of the more popular online apps nowadays. I know my sister and her friends have tended to use it versus I remember when it first came out, like Match.com, I think was the really popular one. But they like a lot of the fact that Bumble, that kind of girls are the ones that are reaching out to match from that perspective. But what you just said, Heather, reminds me of the similarities with real estate, because I have a friend, one of my sister's friends, she's a TikTok influencer. She's great and very smart lawyer, but she also has a whole series of TikToks about basically evaluating people's Bumble ads. Like, so they'll send it to her and she'll be like, nope, you should have done this picture. Wow. You have too many comments about this. This is how you want to portray yourself. I mean, she does
like staging.
Yeah, a humorous way, but
it is like staging. You're right.
Totally, because you're like, this is your one-stop, chance to get someone to click on them or in a house, come take a look at it. And you want to put your best foot forward in a way that is inviting and interesting, makes you want to know more.
Right. Yeah.
Well, maybe if this whole real estate thing doesn't work out, we can be a Bumble. Yeah.
Bumble consultant.
Oh, that sounds better.
Consultant sounds better.
She's just good with words.
Okay. But it sounds like, because we've digressed a little bit, it sounds like Lauren was smart and like usually texted her mom
right
after a date.
Right. So when Chantel's texts and calls went unanswered, she and her son, Lauren's brother, Tavar Gray Smith, went to the Plymouth Street apartment at 33 Plymouth Street in Bridgeport. Upon arriving, they found a note that read, quote, "If you're looking for Lauren, call this number." Chantel immediately called the number and waited for the landlord, Hector Torres, to come downstairs. He owned the apartment and lived upstairs. Torres told her that Lauren had died the previous day.
Wait, so she went over to the apartment and had no idea her daughter was dead. She just thought it was odd that she hadn't heard from her.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's crazy on a number of levels. But if I'm thinking about it from a real estate perspective, like let's just talk leases for a second. Not that it's the landlord's job to like notify a family member of a death. You would think the police would do that. But leases in the state of Texas specifically have a section which asks like, who should the landlord contact in case of an emergency or death? And surely that's pretty standard nationwide. I mean, wouldn't you think? And I mean, not to mention, this is 2021, right? So he could probably Google her or check her Facebook page, like send a message to someone who has the same last name on Facebook, like, hey, could you give me a call?
Right.
There are a number of ways someone could have easily found her mother or brother.
Right. For sure. I totally agree. It just kind of seems like the kind and right thing to do. At least he left a note, though. But yeah, totally. When the landlord met with Lauren's mom, he gave her the number of the detective who had arrived on scene the night before. Tavar immediately called the detective and was told that Lauren was found dead at the apartment and that they were not required to call the family because they had found Lauren's passport in the home and therefore knew who she was.
I'm sorry. Okay, now I am infuriated. I'm glad I had the sip of wine. You're saying that because they knew who she was, there was no reason to notify the family.
That's what they're telling the brother. Correct.
I mean, every time you see something on news, they say we're not going to give the person's name until the family has been notified. I mean, I just thought this was standard operating procedure.
Okay, stop. We're going to pause while I Google real quick. Okay, so I'm reading through all of this, and I'm not going to read it to you all because it's a Uniform Procedures Act. But essentially, it says the victims' families need to be notified in a timely manner, in a sensitive manner. I mean, they're very specific on what the outlines of of the requirements are for notifying a family of a death. So
Right.
that's crazy that they didn't notify her.
Yeah. And you said that was 2008?
2008, yeah.
Okay. It was, yeah, totally. They totally should have notified Lauren's mother. That's just the humane and just and right thing to do. And it's actually because of the public outrage over this case, there has been a change to a Connecticut law becoming effective on October 1st, 2022. Notification of a deceased person's family must be done within 24 hours after the deceased person has been discovered.
Oh, I'm glad that, I mean, it's a horrible story, but I'm glad something good came out of it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if that wasn't infuriating enough, here's what the police report details happened the night of December 12th. Lauren was on a date with an older man whom she met on the dating app Bumble. The 37-year-old man, whom he later found out is Matthew LaFontaine, reported to police that Lauren had invited him to her apartment and that the two were taking tequila shots when Lauren suddenly got sick and went to the bathroom to throw up. When she returned from the bathroom, they drank more tequila with mixers this time, played games, ate, and started a movie. He stated that Lauren fell asleep on the sofa and that he picked her up, carried her to bed, and fell asleep beside her. He further stated that he woke up around 6:30 and saw that Lauren wasn't breathing and had blood coming out of her nose. He called police and began chest compressions at the direction of the 911 operator. According to paramedics who arrived on scene, Lauren was lying on her back with dried blood around her nose, and she was pronounced dead on the scene.
And so, of course, he was immediately brought in for questioning, right?
Well,
I was
not
afraid of
exactly.
that, Alana. I was afraid of that.
Well, it gets worse because according to police, they didn't follow up with him because he was a nice guy and they didn't find any evidence of foul play.
I guess I just figured that if the police find you like with, near, around, or I don't know, actually sleeping with a dead body, that you would just naturally be brought in for questioning, even if they didn't suspect he had done anything. Like, wouldn't they want to understand his story and what happened?
Yeah.
Like, question him.
Right. Well, that doesn't make your blood boil. Listen to this. The family, desperate for answers, continued to call the police. And according to Lauren's family, they were told by Officer Kevin Cronin to stop calling his phone and that Matthew LaFontaine was a good guy and to just leave it alone.
Okay, that's heartbreaking, but it reminds me, I just listened to this podcast. It's called What Happened to Libby Caswell. And this reminds me of something that happened in that case. In this situation, it's a little bit different. It's like a boyfriend, girlfriend, where the boyfriend is being abusive. And so the mom kept calling the police to report that, this boyfriend was showing up at their house and making threats. But by the time the police would get there, he would be gone. And so eventually the police actually gave the mom a nuisance notice for calling them so much,
messed up.
asked her to stop calling them, and unfortunately the daughter later died not very long afterwards. And the police really didn't question that guy either.
That is hard. That is all. I mean, the whole thing, everything's just heartbreaking about that and this. And I see this happen time and time again, especially with minorities. And I'm Hispanic. And I've had someone close to me, my sister, she suffered a horrible loss. And she too has met with similar statements from law enforcement. And it's a terrible, heartbreaking experience to endure.
Yeah, I mean, you've been such a great advocate for your sister. And I should add, we're not bashing on the police. Like 99% of officers perform a great public service. But it is infuriating with someone in that line of work and with that responsibility doesn't hold up like their end of their social contract.
Absolutely. We all have an immense respect for law enforcement, but I think that's what makes it hurt even worse. Like it's because of that respect and that admiration that we have for law enforcement. When stories like this happen, when you hear about it, it really is a punch in the gut.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
So it doesn't appear that the police did a thorough inspection of the home or even treated it like a potential crime scene from the beginning. Lauren's mom went to the apartment and found a used condom in the trash can, even though her date said they did not have sex, bloody sheets, and even a mysterious pill, none of which was taken by forensics.
I mean, if you think about it, there was glasses that they had been drinking from that were still in the kitchen and still in the living room. At a minimum, if they're suspecting or wanting to investigate, did she take something? Was she taking drugs? Was she roofied? Like any of those things, you would think that they would do some sort of modicum of testing of this. And it seems like they didn't at all. And at this point in time, they don't have any idea why she died or how she died. Wouldn't they want to do some sort of investigation?
Right.
She was 23. This wasn't natural.
Right. So after months of waiting, the family did finally receive the coroner's report stating that Lauren died of a mix of fentanyl and alcohol. The family vehemently maintains that Lauren did not use drugs and question how the fentanyl entered into her system.
I'm just can we pause here for a 2nd? I am terrified of this whole fentanyl crisis. And it sounds like it's coming into things that you wouldn't think it would be in.
Right.
Not that I'm saying any drugs are safe, but as teenager moms,
Yes.
my message is everything could have fentanyl, and so you do nothing.
Right.
It's an abstinence message. It's essentially what it is.
Right. No, it's really scary. And I've seen news reports where like people put something on your car, and so you go to move it and there's fentanyl. I mean,
I don't want to be alarmist or conspiracy theorist, but it is
Yes,
a
you do.
crisis. No, it is a crisis in America. And I didn't even know this part of the story. And I was saying, shouldn't they have tested the cups? Now I'm like, yes, they should have definitely tested the cups. Even let's say she willingly took it, air quotes, wouldn't they want to know where she got it from? And I just feel like there's a lot of questions that good police work,
And
would
also-
have done research.
right.
I think it's suspect that she got sick and then he stayed. The gentlemanly thing to do is, you're not feeling well. I enjoyed our date. I would love to call you tomorrow.
Right.
Here are 2 Tylenol and a glass of water.
You're
Who
absolutely
wants
right.
to be hooking up after the person's been
Right. No.
growing up?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Absolutely. So on what would have been Lauren's 24th birthday, January 23rd, 2022, her family organized a march outside of the Morton Government Center. They sang happy birthday and released red and pink balloons. Shortly after the march, Bridgeport Mayor Joseph P. Gannon made comments saying, quote, "Death notifications should be done in a manner that illustrates dignity for the deceased and respect and compassion for the family." And like I mentioned previously, Lauren's family were instrumental in the law that was passed that required Connecticut law enforcement to notify a deceased person's family of the death within 24 hours of identification. So in December of 2023, Chantel Fields and Lauren's family filed a $30 million lawsuit against the city of Bridgeport stating, quote, "My daughter Lauren was a beautiful young Black woman with her whole life ahead of her. She was denied the basic right of an unbiased death investigation." But as of today, there hasn't been any movement or transparency for the family of the status of the case. The family still has many questions and not enough answers. Her cause of death is still listed as an overdose, and no charges have been filed against anyone.
So her 26th birthday then is coming up, like maybe right as we release this. We're recording a little bit before that, but I'm sure that with every birthday and anniversary and holiday that passes with no resolution, that's just heartbreaking for the family. Losing a child is one thing, and I can only imagine so heartbreaking, but losing them in a situation where you feel like their death wasn't investigated properly, that just, there's no closure there, and there's an angst that's probably that just doesn't go away.
Right. Yeah, you have to have that closure. I mentioned my sister earlier, and not to get too much into it or digress too much, I do want to share it at some point, but she's very, very similar. Her spouse passed away, and there's been no resolution for her. And so multiple reasons why this was triggering and upsetting and just infuriating for me, but that too, like it hits really close to home on this. And that is difficult, a thing to have to, like you said, every anniversary, every birthday that passes, it's very difficult for her and the whole family.
Yeah.
But and no one wants to be in the club, and no one could imagine having to endure something like this. But there's some solace in the fact that Chantel and the rest of Lauren's family do have another family that they are able to commiserate with. Someone else lost a friend, a family member, and a daughter. Brenda Lee Walls lost her life the night that Lauren lost hers, also in Bridgeport.
Wait, what? Same night
Same night.
and similar like age-ish?
She was older. She
Okay.
was older. But like Lauren, her family was not notified, and also really weird circumstances. The cause of death is documented to have been natural causes, but there's lots of concerns, and the family has lots of questions. According to the family, law enforcement officials have completely mishandled the case. And like Lauren, the family was not notified by police that Brenda was found dead. They were told by an acquaintance that he found Brenda unresponsive and called 911 when he couldn't shake her awake, saying that all he knew is that the ambulance and coroner drove her away. Brenda's family began making several calls to local police, hospitals, and funeral homes, but it wasn't until they reached out to the medical examiner that they found out that Brenda had died. The medical examiner had already performed her autopsy.
I don't even know what to say to that. That is horrifying.
According to Brenda's mom, quote, "It's almost like they're not aware of her death, or they just don't care. That made us angry." She was raised and born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, paid her taxes, voted, and they treated her like she was nothing, like she was roadkill. Dorothy Rawls Washington and her sister would talk or text every day, and after 2 days of hearing nothing, she became concerned. The last day that she had heard from Brenda, she mentioned that she was going to visit a male neighbor, the same neighbor who later found her unresponsive. Dorothy, another sister, their niece, and her niece's boyfriend went to the neighbor's home looking for Brenda. That is when he told her that he couldn't wake her on December 12th. Brenda's family was also instrumental in the passage of the law, and on the same day that Lauren's family filed that lawsuit against the city, so did Brenda's family, each suing for $30 million.
I mean, it makes me wonder, if there was like a major fentanyl crisis in this area and there was just, a lot of deaths that got overlooked. Not that that's right. I mean, this is 100% infuriating, and I feel so bad for these families.
Mm-hmm.
They totally deserved closure that they didn't get.
Right.
And, probably the police and the medical examiner, everybody just thought they would go away.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't think they would step up and be vocal advocates for their children. And I'm so glad they did.
Right. For sure. So this was a story that we all felt needed telling. It isn't a beautiful beachfront property or high-rise in New York City or a rich aristocratic family, but as important and as worthy of notoriety.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So we discussed this earlier. It was a little difficult to research the home. She was renting it. It's our first time doing a rental. And then there's just not a lot of information about the story online, which is another reason why we felt it was needed to share. But what we were able to find is that it sold on July 17th, 2023 for $385,000. And from all we can tell, it's still being used as a rental. But yeah, we just didn't have a lot of information on that particular home.
It looked like in 2022 that unit itself was rented for about $1,500, which I thought was a pretty good deal for a 2-1. And the pictures were cute. I mean, it's an older house that, it's popular around here for people to rent kind of like 2 bedrooms in an older house. But yeah, and obviously... Well, actually, I don't know. Do you think they had to disclose it?
Well, so I've been Googling over here while we've been recording, and apparently in Connecticut, you don't have to disclose the death on a property either for sale or for lease. Connecticut considered death on a property to be a non-material fact. That means it does not require disclosure.
And when I Googled the address, just Googling the address like you would if you were purchasing a home, the top news stories weren't about the death. It was about the listings, the Zillow listings and the Redfin listings. So, I mean, you have to dig a few pages in to find anything showing the address. So.
Well, and I think that's a good thing to bring up. Like if you're about to rent a home or you're going to buy a home, you can go to your local police department's website and typically do an address search. We did that on the past couple homes we bought. And, we actually... not this house, but the house before this, we discovered that there were like 3 break-ins. And so I called the owners and I was like, hey, tell me the story of this. And, it all made sense. But that's a good due diligence, and again, other due diligence, check the sex offender registry. Like if there are things you're curious about, the internet is your oyster. Go figure it out, but do your due diligence before you buy or move into a property.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, would you rent? I mean, how do we?
I mean, it's a rental. I feel like, part of the concern I think there are 2 concerns with a property where somebody's been murdered. You have the value concern, and then you have would you live there because of the crime concern. So I think, as a rental, the value sort of comes out of it because it's not your investment. Maybe you get a better deal. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was a violent death. It sounds like maybe it was some sort of overdose, whether it was, on her own part or maliciously intended. I think I would live there.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think so as well.
Oh,
I think I would live there.
Always surprise
I know.
It
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Surprises
Make any sense. Mel?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that would be what would stop me from it. I mean, I would be suspect about it from a from a property value, and I would do a lot of research if they're like, it seemed like a nice, normal neighborhood, but I would definitely do a little bit of research into crime in the area.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought us this story. I think what we would like our listeners to know is, it's easy for us to find stories about prominent homes and prominent people, but we really want to cover stories from all sorts of different backgrounds and people of diverse backgrounds, whether it's socioeconomic or minorities or, outside of the country even. So if you have an idea for a Crime Estate podcast episode, please email us. You can email us at crimeestatepodcast@gmail.com. That is the best way to give us story ideas. And we're so appreciative of all the people that have already emailed. We have a couple of great stories lined up as a result. So thank you all for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just, a reminder that, we do want to engage with our listeners more in 2024 and get your ideas on our stories to us, as Heather was saying. But please first leave us a 5-star review whenever you listen and wherever you listen to your podcast. And then at the end of your review, tell us why you would think it would be fun to do a live Zoom minisode with your podcast club or a group of closest friends. And we're going to try and do one interactive podcast a quarter, and you could join us.
Yeah, this is going to be so fun. Maybe a little terrifying because, like you said, Elena, we leave a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. But I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll totally be fun. But I want to do a blooper reel with all of the stuff that is on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun. This will be fun too.
With no video. With no video.
No
cameras.
video. No.
Oh, Lordy mercy. Yeah. Thank you so much for this story. It was great. And I really appreciate it. And I thought it was well researched because I know the research on this was hard. So thanks for this, Elena.
Yeah.
And we'll see y'all next week.
See ya. Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening and being a part of our Crime Estate family.
If you're curious about today's featured Crime Estate, you can find additional photos and details from today's episode online at crimeestate.com or on Facebook and Instagram by following at Crime Estate Podcast.
Have a crime estate we should cover? Let us know. Shoot us an email at crimeestatepodcast@gmail.com. Until next week.